Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. And now, here are Bob and Richard.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Today we're back to Bob and Richard answer their emails. Please keep these coming, either by leaving a question in the comment section under the link on gamblingwithanedge.com or by sending us an email at gamblingwithanedge@gmail.com. We just did this last week, but we requested more, and we have about 15 additional ones that came in the last week, in addition to the leftovers that we already had. Thank you very much. First question. Playing table games, Blackjack, my win-loss record at a particular casino says I have had a $4,800 win for 2019. My personal records say I've actually lost $600. Should I care? Would you call a host or table game manager to resolve? My answer, I don't know what Rich's is going to be. Well, first, it's not good news. If a casino thinks you had a winning year, you're that much closer to being kicked out. Although 4,800 is not a red flag at most places. At the same time, I'm not sure a host would believe you. Players typically exaggerate their wins and losses in either direction for whatever purposes suit them. If you went in and showed your records over several years, it would show the host that you're a more serious player than is desired at their place. At the same time, if you ever get behind at this casino in 2020, I would consider stopping for the year until 2021. You do not want to show a winning record several years in a row. Richard.
So there are two issues. One is for your taxes. And in that case, I would not worry about it at all, since if you keep records the way you're supposed to, the IRS will accept your version of what happened over the casinos, because the casinos are notorious for making these kind of mistakes. As for contacting the table games manager or host, no, I wouldn't do that, because they're not going to want to deal with it in any way, and I don't know that they could, even if they wanted to. But for them, it's just unwanted additional paperwork, and they really don't care. So, I definitely would not bring it up to them. One way you can avoid this is when you get up from playing, just ask the boss, what do you have my win or loss at? And, correct them if they have it wrong when you play. I mean, it sounds to me like you're playing with a player's card, which obviously I don't normally recommend, but it sounds like your action is small enough that, you may not be on their radar at all if you are a winning player. But you can just ask, what do you have my win-loss at? What do you have my average bet? And then you can correct them if they're wrong, or you can try to inflate your losses or inflate your average bet or whatever. So anyway, that's my feelings on it.
If you were doing this, would you correct them in both directions or just in one direction? In other words, if let's say you won 300, if they said you won 900, you would want to correct them. If they said you lost 600, you go, that's close enough.
No. If they say I lost 600, I'd still probably say I think it was 900. But you always want the losses to be bigger and the wins to be smaller and your average bet to be bigger. So, and the other thing to ask is, how much did you have as my buy-in? Because that's something that they often miss, and which is why they may have the wrong figure. The other thing that they do, and this is just natural, because the higher-ups want them keeping track of every dollar that is going over the table, and if there is $500 in chips missing from the rack and they don't know where it went, well, they just assign it to somebody that's at the table. And that's probably why your record is so far off. The pit boss, look, there's chips missing. All right, I'll just put it on that guy. So, yeah. So that one way to get around that is by asking them at the end of your session what they have and then correcting them.
All right. Next question. How can I get a copy of entries about me that are in OSN or Biometrica? And are there other databases of note, perhaps Griffin? I am hoping there's a real concrete way to achieve this, not I know a guy who knows a guy, or hang on Blackjack forums until people like you enough to do you a favor. So, Richard, this is for you, because for me, you're the guy I know who knows a guy.
Yeah, well, I don't know what you think some other answer could be. I mean, no, you can't just write to OSN and say, hey, am I in your database? The only way you're going to know is by knowing somebody who has access. And I don't know any other way of knowing a guy who has access other than making friends, making contacts within the community. And how you do that is you either meet them over the table, or you meet them in chat rooms, or you meet them on forums. Unfortunately, I don't know any other way to do it.
What about, do you ever befriend a casino worker who would have access to this information?
Yes. Oh, of course. But again, that's knowing a guy who knows a guy, right? I mean, but so in my case, yes, I know people who work in casinos that can access the information. I also know people who don't work in casinos that can access the information. But basically, I met them by hanging out on forums or meeting people socially at blackjack parties or things like that.
All right. Since Richard's been hogging all the answers so far, we got one here for me. Somebody wants me to explain any differences in double-double bonus 9-6. In other words, are all of these games the same?
Wait, I only heard you mention one game. You said double-double bonus 9-6.
That's correct. Are all double-double bonus 9-6 games the same as other double-double bonus 9-6 games? That's how I think it was meant. Okay, some casinos only pay $239 for the straight flush instead of $250, which doesn't cost you much. Some also pay $239 for all of the four of a kinds that typically pay $250. Those together take away about 0.4%. These enhancements were made specifically for $5 single line games, where a 250 coin jackpot returns $1,250, including a W2G, and a 239 coin jackpot returns $1,195 without a W2G. Even though the games were designed for $5 single line machines, slot directors are free to put those pay schedules on any denomination they like. When WMS decided to compete with IGT, which owns about 80% of the video poker market, they decided to do it by increasing the straight flush amount from $250 to $275. This is hard to get excited about. Since purchased by Scientific Games, you can occasionally find these games out there. It's worth a teeny bit, not much. If you play in New York racinos, the game that looks exactly like 9-6 double-double bonus will return about 93% instead of the 99% it's supposed to return. In that market, there's a state-sponsored ripoff that makes deals. There's a state-sponsored ripoff that deals the games unfairly to help the state balance its budget. In Washington State, a game that looks like 9-6 double-double bonus is actually like a slot machine where skill doesn't matter at all. There are probably more examples out there. If you're playing standard 9-6 double-double bonus, there are different tax laws in various locations that make the returns different. In Mississippi, for example, there's a 3% tax, non-refundable on all W2Gs. So 9-6 double-double bonus for quarters pays out a higher percent than 9-6 double-double for $5, which gets lots of W2Gs. For people like me, regular 9-6 double-double bonus is unplayable, usually. Slot clubs, promotions, and theoretical can all make a difference. These vary from casino to casino, and every casino is a bit different. All right. Back to Richard. Apparently there's been enough of Bob questions. My best friend and I have spent the last 18 months learning and perfecting our card counting game. We have very different strategies regarding hitting and running and versus throwing it in a store's face. We also have very different levels of wonging. He fakes it to the extreme. Both of us have experienced financial success over 200 or 300 hours of play and have checked out each other, and we're both good. He's had many back-offs over 18 months where I've only had one, and that's the El Cortez, which I don't think counts. I'm left questioning. If a casino is about which of the ways is best to go. So, Richard, of those two ways, which do you prefer? Or is that personal choice?
It depends on what you mean by best. I suspect that your friend is earning more money per hour than you are with his strategy. But if you're unwilling to do a lot of traveling, so you don't want to get burned out in your locals' places, I don't know where you live, what part of the country, how many casinos you have at your disposal. So if you're unwilling to just hit the road and go to the next place every time you get barred, well, then, your strategy is working for you. I think his strategy is going to earn him more money. And you might want to look, it's only 200 hours, so that's not a great, a huge sample size, but you might want to look at what you're each earning per hour and compare and see if that has any bearing on what you may do in the future.
All right. The next question. His state has a California-style player-banked 3-card poker and ultimate Texas Hold'em dealt by poker dealers who can be extremely sloppy due to a lack of proper training. Now, he both says player-banked and dealt by dealers, so I'm not sure.
No, the card rooms have professional dealers, but the players are the bankers. The players don't touch the cards and deal them.
Okay. Does the fact that I'd be winning another player's money, the bank who's actually a company but treated as a player, rather than the house's money, who is employing a sloppy dealer, change the equation for whole carding ethically or legally?
I don't, in my opinion, it changes neither. You're playing against a corporation, that's who's putting up the money to bank those games in the vast majority of cases. But even if it's an individual, I would not have any ethical qualms about playing that game, and I would not be worried about the legality of it, since the only place that I've heard of that calls that illegal is an Indian reservation, where they use it as an excuse to steal the player's money. So for me, no, there's no ethical or legal. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on the internet, but.
Okay. This is a comment by me as in lieu of a letter at the moment. I recently wrote about a video poker game that had a bad pay table, assuming you played 20 coins, which is how it was designed, but one box allowed the game payout for 5 coins, turning a 95% game into a 380% game. The good news was that it was for nickels, so the 4 times Royals still were below the W2G threshold, even though you can only get $250 per hour. Through the machine, it was worth several $100s per hour. In the past several weeks, I received emails from several people describing similar situations. These mistakes are out there, folks. Just keep looking. Hi, Richard. Good morning. I started scouting Ultimate Texas Hold'em dealers at my local and found 2 that give me one of the whole cards 100% of the time. So I've been playing them for the past week or so and scouting the rest of the casinos. Wanted to ask if you have any tips for Ultimate Texas Hold'em hole carding. I'm trying to find the strategy for it. I know Grosjean has one, but his book is crazy pricey.
Well, yes, his book is crazy pricey. If you can even find a copy that's for sale.
Well, the original price is only $250, which is not crazy pricey. The ones on the internet are a couple $1,000s or more.
Yeah. So, I'm not aware of any other published strategy, hole card strategy for Ultimate Texas Hold'em. So, again, other than hanging out on forums and chat rooms and networking with other players you meet that might be able to get you a copy of the strategy, I don't know another source. But I would also say this. When you say you are seeing one of the dealer's cards, if you're seeing a flop card, that's a game I wouldn't even bother playing. If you're seeing one of the dealer's hole cards, that's a different thing. So, players sometimes get in trouble when they don't know the proper strategy because they think they have an edge when they actually may not. So if all you were seeing is a flop card and you don't know the strategy, you probably do not have an edge on that game.
All right. We got this question several weeks ago, but didn't see it until it was too late to give a timely answer. So I'm going to give an untimely answer. The XFL Football League is about to start. How do you handicap games in a league where you don't know the players or the teams? I reached out to Anthony Curtis and asked if he and Frank B bet the XFL, and he says that whenever a new league starts up, they take the under and bet the dogs for the first week anyway. Then they take it from there. But that's the way they handicap the first week. And they would do it every time a new league starts up in every game, simply because it takes so long to mesh and to put things together. That's all I got on that. I'm a big fan of your podcast, thank you, and wanted to thank you for providing helpful information. Recreational player using high-low count, 1 to 5 bet spread, normally plays at 6-deck, $10 minimum table in Louisiana. First question, what's a good bet spread that players use to avoid heat while having a positive EV?
Yeah, boy. So it really depends on the game, obviously, but 1 to 5 does not sound like much of a spread unless you're walking away from negative counts. So, and a lot of it is going to depend on the penetration. So that's a little hard to answer, but my standard answer for these kinds of questions is you should buy the Casino Verite software at qfit.com. You can plug in all these questions and it'll run simulations for you and give you the answers. So,
all right.
Yeah, because as I say, it depends on penetration and your spread, and then there's also speed of the game to consider. But yeah, pick up the software.
Next question. He recently heard about the illustrious 18, Don Schlesinger. Should he spend time to learn other indices?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're going to take the game seriously, then take the time to learn. I would, in professional blackjack, Stanford Wong put together charts for the indices from -1 to +6. And I think that's a reasonable amount. The indices for the bigger negative counts aren't as important because, if you're playing them at all, you have your smallest bets out. But often, many players are walking away from negatives anyway. So, I would absolutely learn more than just the illustrious 18.
Okay. Another card counter. He was playing at, it's a long one, so I'm trying to shorten it. He was playing at Dover Downs in Delaware. And the pit figured out he was counting rather quickly. They let him know that, but they didn't back him off. Eventually, this player took $2,000 in chips to the cage. The cage pulled in the chips and then demanded ID, allegedly because I appear under 30 years old. I declined and asked for my chips back. The cage said they would not give the chips back without ID. So, it's not just that they wouldn't cash them, they refused to return them, because this was in the context of the pit knowing I was counting. I was and am concerned about the casino putting my name in an internal or external database. The longer I stay out of these databases, the less hassle I'll encounter. I stated I would call gaming. Couldn't get through. Left a voicemail. Eventually, a woman called back, identified herself as a Delaware State Trooper. She said the casino had the right to withhold my chips if I didn't show ID. I countered that if this was truly a state law regulation, it would be publicly available, so where's it written down? That conversation went nowhere. Question. Are either of us aware of whether it's true or legal that a casino can keep your chips without cashing them if you don't show ID? It's not big enough to hire an attorney.
I have no idea what the laws are in Delaware. And regardless of what the law is, often they can just hold your chips hostage until you give the ID anyway. I mean, the first mistake was you said that they let you know they knew you were counting, but didn't do anything. So it sounds like you continued to play, which, if so, that was a mistake. But as soon as they let you know that they knew you were counting, you should get up from the table and leave the casino without cashing your chips, because this is exactly what happens in many cases. So if you just leave with the chips and come back at a later time and cash them, then you should be fine. But lesson learned, and yeah, you probably are in the database. And, people have to realize that's not the end of the world. Every professional player, or almost every professional player, is in the database. And the vast majority of them earn far more money after they're in the database than before, just because careers can be a long time. So, yeah, pros are in the database, you're in the database. It's not that big a deal.
Okay. Another question. I recently had a large play that was so positive it never lost. That play has ended, and it's been more challenging than I expected to return to the swings of my regular AP grind. Have either of you ever dealt with a similar situation, and if so, how?
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but fortunately for me, I have had many of those situations, and it absolutely spoils you. Which is why I've said on the show many times, I stopped counting cards, decades ago, just because it's very hard to go back to that grind when you're used to winning all the time. So for me, it changed me in that I would rather play less, but with a much bigger edge. So, you get spoiled. No doubt. And when you were talking about that nickel play that was earning you hundreds of dollars an hour, I would think that was one of those kinds of plays where you're just automatically going to win,
Yes. Now, I've never had a play that never lost, but back during my $1 million run in 2001, even after taking the night that I made $500,000 in that night, I still averaged more than $25,000 a week for 6 months. That was by far my biggest extended winning streak, and it took some adjusting when it was over.
Yeah, I would think.
I had to ask myself some serious questions, such as, do I have enough to just retire? My answer, no. Do I enjoy the process? Answer, yes. Is there anything else I can be doing where I can be earning $10,000 a month, which is what I was making back then, that I would enjoy as much as this? Answer, no. Conclusion, go back to what I was doing. So I did cut out some of the low-end plays. Before that, for example, I'd drive 15 miles to pick up $50. After I became pseudo-wealthy, I would no longer do that. Before, I would go to drawings where I had a reasonable chance of winning $25 or more. Afterwards, I had to have an EV of about $200 at least before I'd show up at a drawing. Another similar situation that's happening closer to today is that I periodically get removed from playing video poker at various places. The plays I was making before I was kicked out were higher end than the plays I'm making now. Sometimes I'm even playing now dollar progressives, which is not something I would have considered years ago. But if I'm going to stay in the game, that's what I have to do.
Yeah, you're talking about what kind of dollar EV you're willing to work for or whatever, which is different than the variance part of it, right? If you've been on plays where you're just going to win all the time, and then you have to go, like, for example, you were talking about playing progressives. Well, that's a game where you can go for a long time and lose.
Yes.
And it does make it harder. I mean, obviously not for single line dollars or whatever, that the amount of money you're losing there isn't consequential for you. But, if you're used to playing and winning all the time, the thought of going out and counting cards and having a losing streak that lasts for 150 hours, I just couldn't get up for that. You know what I mean? It made it too difficult for me to want to go do that. Because fortunately for me, as I say, I've been very fortunate that, I was able to find things with much higher edges.
And both you and I are senior citizens now, and we don't have to do this for a living, right. which is a different situation than some of our listeners find themselves in. They are still out there grinding, and that's the best EV out there. All right, take another question. Somebody made some Super Bowl bets at FanDuel. After it was over, he went to FanDuel to cash out his tickets. He has about $3,000 in tickets, and said he needed to have ID and Social Security to get the tickets cashed. He asked for the tickets back. They would not give it to him because they said they'd already been swiped. So either you give us your ID or we'll keep these tickets and not pay you. He did not want to give up his ID. So he's out over $3,000. He says they told him it was not for tax purposes or laws. It was just a policy of their sportsbook, and they're not willing to make an exception.
Social Security number, just as their policy, not, wow.
That's what he said. So he wants to know if it was legal, what they did, and if he took him to court, it would well cost him over $3,000 he was trying to cash out. Does he have any, if he took him to small claims court, he'd have to give his real name in the small claims court, which would defeat the purpose of not showing ID. So my answer is, Rich and I are not attorneys. I would attempt to find a New Jersey attorney who dealt with gambling issues. An hour consultation might be worth it. He might be willing to make a few phone calls on the contingency basis where he gets, say, 1/3 of the money he receives and you get 2/3 or some such. Also check with other sportsbook. If not giving up your ID is a major goal of yours, it could be sports betting is not the game to choose.
Yeah, but he said they kept the tickets. So how does he, if he goes back now, how does he prove that they were his tickets at all? I mean, I have no idea what the law is, but it just seems crazy that they would demand a Social Security number. I mean, that's not something I would want to give out.
Yep.
But, yeah, anyway, I don't have an answer, unfortunately. I think your answer about checking with an attorney, see if they'll do it on a contingency or something.
All right, another question about roulette. Don't get many roulette questions. He usually plays 2 12s or columns. Generally, I play with the same $100 starting money for a while. Is this getting me any comp points? Are they only looking at the $100 buy-in? So my response is, you're playing a game with a 5.25% house edge that requires no skill whatsoever. Any comps you get will generally be less than you could get from paying retail. Max Rubin's Comp City is pretty good at explaining how the comp system works in table games. The book is a bit dated, but a lot of the information still applies.
Yeah, but as to your question, the buy-in has really nothing to do with it. The way your comp system works is your average bet plus the number of bets you make per hour. So, and then there will be some fudge factor based on how much you lose. But, yeah, so the amount of your buy-in doesn't really figure into it.
Okay. We're about halfway through, and now it's time for a commercial break. The South Point has more than 10,000 games returning more than 99%. This is more than anyone else has. In February, the promotion is to earn free buffets. Play 300 points between 3 a.m. and 1 p.m., get a free lunch buffet. 300 more points before 1 p.m., you get a dinner buffet. Otherwise, 600 points prior to 8 p.m., you get a dinner buffet. If they have your email address on weekends, you get a Play X and Earn Y promotion every Friday through Sunday. Any of these you have buffet tickets, they will expire Thursday, March 5th. So eat up. Our next video poker class on the 25th of February is NSU Deuces Wild. NSU stands for Not So Ugly. It refers to a 99.7% game that with the 0.3 slot club is basically an even game 24/7. Plus there's these promotions, plus you get mailers. It is a relatively easy game. Most people think Deuces Wild is easier than games based on jacks or better. So on the 25th, we will have the beginner and intermediate class in that. The following week, we will have the advanced class, where we look at all the exceptions for things such as when you're dealt deuce 4-5, sometimes you hold just the deuce, and sometimes you hold the deuce 4-5, depending on the other two cards. And the rules involved there's several different situations that apply there. So if you're planning to take the advanced course, you need to at least have a working knowledge of the game, which comes from experience or coming to the class on February 25th. At videopoker.com, it's the best place to play lots of games. You get correction on many of the games if you have the gold membership. The gold membership is $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year. The game of the week is Lucky Eights. This is a rare case where a video poker game has the same name as a table game side bet. It's 10 coins per line, where you get bonuses for 3 or more eights, including full houses with 3 eights. If you get dealt trips or higher about every 35 hands, you get to spin the wheel, which include amounts ranging from 188 to, very occasionally, 18,888. In Deuces Wild variations, you spin the wheel on dealt flushes or higher, which occur every 42 hands on average. You'll need to figure out the strategy for yourself, but it appears to be possible with simple algebra. With 88445, for example, it must be correct to just hold the 8s because of the bonus on 3 or more 8s. On Deuces Wild variations, where you would normally hold a suited Jack 10-9 over a pair of 8s, in this game, surely holding the 8s is better. First time we got this next question. Why don't you guys have a Patreon account?
Actually, we have been. I have had that question a few times in the past.
Did we discuss it on the air?
No, we haven't discussed it on the air.
So a Patreon account is one where listeners to a podcast or some other activity pay some amount of money, say $5 a month to $20 a month, something, for the content. It supports the expenses of the podcast and allows for fewer commercials. We haven't talked about this, but I would not be opposed. To make this work, we need to create something extra to give the Patreon subscribers over what the non-Patreon subscribers to receive. I have no idea what that would be. Richard, have you thought about this at all?
I've thought about it, and because we have sponsors, I don't see a need for it or a desire to do it in my own case. So if we can keep it free for the listeners, I'd rather keep it free. If we were to lose all our sponsors or something, well then, yeah, that might be the way we would have to go. But
we do get money from the sponsors, but Richard and I are basically doing this for peanuts. If we didn't like what we're doing, then we wouldn't be doing it. This is not for the money.
Right. And as long as we're not paying out of pocket to do it, I mean, I think that would be the line for me. But so yeah, if we can keep it free for you guys, I would prefer to do that. So, yeah. But thank you for thinking of it.
Good. Yeah, but if somebody wanted to send us a check for a couple $1,000s, would we return it? Next time that happens will be the first time. If someone were going to move to Vegas and become an AP, which game would you recommend learning first? I'm assuming that the player already has a good baseline in comp hustling. He goes on, in my case, I'm a good red 7 blackjack counter, all right at hold'em tournaments, and good at jacks or better.
Well, wait, but he's asking what to learn first?
Yeah, he wants to become an AP, and he doesn't think that's a good enough repertoire to be a successful AP in Vegas.
Well, I would not recommend Las Vegas as a great place to be a card counter, right? They're very quick to pick you off and very quick to spread your picture everywhere here. So, video poker and live poker. But, the most important thing I would say to do would be to expand your network, start to meet people, and start to learn more AP moves. That I think that would be the best advice I could give it. Oh, except you say you know the way the comp game works. Here's the other thing. It really depends on how big your bankroll is, too. For example, if you're retired and you have a sizable bankroll, well, then playing the comp game may not be a bad way to go at all. To play blackjack and or maybe even craps, depending. If you can play the comp game well, which is an art in and of itself, you could have a very high hourly EV off of the comps. And I'm not just talking about food. I'm talking about comps you can convert into cash.
Like show tickets or fight tickets or something like that.
And airfare and things like that, yeah. And depending on how big your bankroll is, loss rebates.
Okay. And on that, he mentioned he plays jacks or better. Now, that's the best game to learn first, but there are few, if any, opportunities to play that game with an edge in Las Vegas. If you're going to be in video poker, you need to branch out and learn other games, probably including some progressives. Which one? Well, it depends on which side of town you live on and what denominations you play. If you're searching for homes in Vegas, search out the nearby casinos as well and to see what games they have the promotions on, the progressives on. Next question. Whatever happened to Jerry Patterson? I have no information on this. Richard.
Boy, it's been many years. Last I heard he was living in Reno, but I think it's been 20 years since I've heard anything. He'd be quite old by now. So, yeah, I really don't know if he's still alive and if so, what he's doing.
If any of our listeners know, feel free to make a post in the notes following the podcast on gamblingwithanedge.com.
Yeah, and just for those people who don't know, Jerry Patterson was a very competent card counter and went to the dark side and started writing books about, finding lucky dealers and tables that are losing and weird things like that. So,
he went rogue. Are there any meetups in Vegas for general APs?
Not that I'm aware of. Certainly not that are published on meetup.com or something like that.
Right. That would be a good way to get casino.
To know surveillance people. A good way to know surveillance people would be to publish a meetup for advantage players. Certainly there are informal ones, but none that are publicly notified.
Yeah, and so this is, you're going to have to befriend somebody who thinks you are competent, and they'll form groups sometimes.
Right.
But it's context.
We keep coming back to that, expanding your network.
We do. And Richard, for example, knows everybody. And it's much harder for me to make contacts with people. But Richard is gifted at that. I'm not sure how he works at it, and he's very good at it. So different people have different skills in that. Next question. When people leave the AP life, where do they go?
Storytelling.
Possibly Kingman, Arizona. Okay. So then he goes on and says, anywhere I know, but quite a few go to stock trading or game instruction. Anything else?
Yeah, I would say a lot of people go into the markets because it's a much bigger casino, right? That's where Thorpe went, and I had a number of friends who were blackjack players, that ended up going into the options markets and things like that.
Yeah, part of it depends on why they left. One is if they went broke, that would be a different scenario, that they just got tired of the AP life for one reason or another. There's a lot
Or they retired, and so they go into other things.
Another question. He says, don't ask me why, but 6 months ago I decided that it would be challenging to take $1 million from the casinos in a legal way, and he started reading every book on blackjack and practicing the counts and the deviations. He's purchased all the tools available, including CVCX, is that Casino Verite?
Yeah.
And put a lot of time into practicing while he does his regular activities. He's been in contact with Colin Jones at Blackjack Apprenticeship. Based on that, thinks he has a good winning game, but he continues to practice and to be sharp. My question is, after listening to almost all your podcasts, it seems that for someone with a large bankroll, there are other ways to get to his goal of winning over $1 million from the casino with a lot less heat than counting cards, and he wants some kind of guidance as to where to go for that.
Well, we're back to the network thing. I don't know of anyone who just learned it from a book or whatever and went out and did it. Other than, there are guys, there are guys who have learned to count cards and on their own just went out and pounded away and made a lot of money. But if you're talking about learning other ways of beating the casinos, there isn't literature out there. You can listen to this show and sometimes you'll learn things from here, or at least get hints of what direction to take. But the only way I really know to do it is to get into a network of other people and learn from them and help each other.
And if you wanted video poker in your mix, it's pretty tough. The edges in video poker in Vegas and in many other places are smaller. The ones who are making big money do a lot of traveling, and some are doing things that are moderately shady, such as having 14 player cards all at every casino they go to and milking that system. So I pretty local in
making $1 million, you're pretty much going to have to travel. I can't think of any one locale where you're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I was able to do it 20 years ago. The world has turned since then.
Right. Yeah.
And my EV on the play where I made $1 million was closer to 400,000. It was still a lucrative situation, but combined with a little bit of luck was nice. Although
you might be able to still make $1 million playing online. You might have to move to England or something to do it, or another country.
You're talking poker, particularly?
No, I'm talking about online casinos or sports betting. I'm just not sure of what the online
world is like
these days. But because it would be very difficult to do it here in the U.S. But from Canada or somewhere else, it might be different.
Then it would only be highly difficult instead of very difficult. Okay, someone had some questions because last week he says he hit a 6-figure win on a carnival game. Congratulations. He wants to know about tipping. He's heard 0.5% to 1% on the video on the Wizard of Vegas forum. He's heard a lower percentage is acceptable for higher jackpots. However, there seemed to be some judgmental murmuring when I only tipped $1,000 on a $100,000 win. My play was not an advantage. Curious, what would you have tipped and what you've seen non-AP tips on big wins? For me, I would let them murmur. There's no amount of tip that's going to satisfy everybody. Ask yourself, why are you giving your money away? Does that make you happier? Great. Go for it. Give it away. Are you doing it because you think you're supposed to? Do you think it buys you something? Money's a tool to be used to buy things, including happiness, including good things for people you care about. When you give it away, you no longer have it. Your $100,000 jackpot may well turn out to be the only one of those you ever learn in your life. And when you're playing a game without the house edge, you're going to lose it all back eventually. And when you do, these dealers are not going to be standing in line to be giving you back tips. Do you have any comments on tipping?
Well, he said he wasn't playing with an edge. So if you are playing with an edge, you very well may want to tip in that situation because you may want to be playing that dealer again in the future, and it might be buying you something. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. It's situational, but
all right, taxes. He says he realizes you're not expert. There seems to be articles saying the IRS mandates a 24% withholding on gambling winnings.
Huh?
That's not true, but that's what he says. But withholding and the actual tax bill are two different things. My income this year will be above the 24% marginal bracket. So does he need to withhold more? Is it treated as income? Do I need to withhold Social Security too? My response to that is you're correct that we're not tax experts. Most states do not require you to withhold any money when you hit a jackpot. The IRS and state governments do, however, require that you pay your taxes when due. If you're the kind who can invest the money and have it available next April 15th, that's a much more profitable solution than letting the IRS hold it for no money at all. Go see a competent accountant. In most states, winning may be offset by losses, not all. Even if you don't have good records for the first 2 months of the year, documenting the last 10 months can generate documented losses, which will reduce your tax situation.
Yeah, it sounds like he was talking about doing his own withholding, which doesn't make any sense. And I think he might be talking about paying quarterly estimated tax. So, yeah, I'm just not clear what he's talking about because he said he withholding it. So, yeah, as Bob said, just talk to your tax guy because if federally you get to write off your losses against your gains. So your state might have another tax situation, but I would talk to your accountant and document all those losses for the next 10 months.
All right. This is the same questioner. He assumes the casino is going to want their money back. His question is, he had a negative expectation of only $10 to $20. So I'm not sure what time period that is. But he says, will casinos generally reach out to offer commensurate with the level of money they could now possibly win? Should I hold out to get contacted by the casino for an offer to come in? And my answer is I'd give them some time to come up with an offer. But if they don't, figure out when you want to come in and call a host, see what they'll do for you. Every casino is different. There's no telling what you get, if anything, until you ask.
Right, but if his negative EV is only $10 or $20, he's probably not going to get much, if anything, at all.
Well, they might.
Unless they think his negative EV was a whole lot. But they don't want their money back. I'm not sure. It sounds like he won some money and he thinks they want it back, which they don't care. I mean, they put a value on you as a customer. The smart casinos say, if this customer comes to our casino for a weekend, we expect to win this much in EV from that customer. And that's how they base their offer.
That's how the smart casinos base their offer.
Right. And so if you don't get an offer, as Bob said, call a host and say you're thinking about coming and find out what they're willing to give you.
All right. Aspiring AP started out as a card counter, but Richard said multiple times he wouldn't recommend his son do card counting, and I agree. He's currently been hustling slots and making more than low-limit card counting. He found a whole card dealer who shows 100% of the time with the ability to see 100% of the face-down card. He deals just about every carnival game as well as Blackjack, but the game the player is most interested in is Ultimate Texas Hold'em. Played with the dealer a couple times, and he can verify the ease to which he can see the whole card. He wants to know, but the dealer rotates. Should he play with this dealer on all games, including on the smaller edges if you see the whole card, or just wait till he comes around for Ultimate Texas Hold'em?
Well, again, we talked about this earlier. You say you can see the whole card, and it depends on what that means in that game. If it means one flop card, then that is not a great game for you to play. By far, well, I shouldn't say by far. There are other games that would be much better options than Ultimate Texas Hold'em. Ultimate Texas Hold'em has a lot of variance involved. So, Blackjack might be a much better option. Obviously, Mississippi Stud is the best option if they have that. But back to the question, it would look weird for you to jump around and constantly go to the same dealer's table. That is probably going to burn it out faster than if you pick your spots.
Even if you manufacture a friendship with this dealer, and if this dealer likes fishing, well, then you always keep talking about fishing when you go there, and they ask you, why do you go to this dealer? You go, well, I like talking about fishing. And
you can try to make up excuses for why you're doing it, but they're going to notice that you keep going to the same dealer. Every time the dealer moves, you move with the dealer. So,
all right, we've had several more questions here about networking, which I'm going to skip for now. Somebody recently played in a local casino's football pool during the NFL season. Part of the rules is the casino listed 7 random games, which they stated would pick 6 Sunday games and Monday night games. On week 16, the games listed 1 early Sunday game, 3 late Sunday games, Sunday night, Monday night, but also Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. local. What would you do? Would you go ask if they're using a game against their own rules? Or just go home and come back Saturday evening after the game is played and including that on your list? And then he throws a teaser. He says, let me know if you want the rest of the story.
So he's assuming that you'll be able to include the Saturday game after it's over?
The rules are you can do your things until midnight Saturday. And
he's sure that the Saturday game is for this week and not next week.
Yeah, there's one game around Christmas time every year where the college bowl season isn't really going that far. And so the NFL has Saturday games as well. Just 1 or 2 weekends a year that's the case. So I'm guessing that I don't know what I'm guessing. It depends on. So if it's year long, you might be disqualified for trying to include that game Saturday night, even though the rules had stated expert. They may say, nope, can't do it. Common sense says you can't do it, and disqualify you, and then your whole season is gone. If you were close to the top going in, and you get disqualified on week 16, that can be expensive. If it's week by week results, it might be worth taking a shot. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a good answer. I would guess that they would not accept that game if you turned in the card after the game was played, but maybe I'd give it a shot 1 week and see what happened.
All right. We are really close to out of time. We have more questions left, which is good, but we still want you to do more questions in the future. We usually have a recommendation. I've talked about it before, the Matthew Dix Speak Up podcast, but this last week I was listening to it, and they had this question from this fan of the show named Richard Munchkin. Now, I don't know for a fact that it's the same Richard Munchkin that I know, but it sounded kind of like it might be. So the Matthew Dix Speak Up podcast for the week, it was just before Valentine's Day, whenever the date of that was, we'll have a feature talking about Richard and Richard's question. So, Richard, assuming you are the Richard Munchkin it was talking about, how did it feel to have your name mentioned on the podcast? And is there any backstory there?
No, not really. I mean, as our listeners know, we're both big fans of storytelling, and so I like that podcast. And it teaches you how to be a better storyteller. So I've corresponded with Matthew Dix quite a bit over the last few months. So, yeah, he used one of my questions, or actually it wasn't a question, it was a comment about something he calls homework for life, which if you're interested in what homework for life is, you can Google that, and there is a TED Talk by Matthew Dix about homework for life. So,
and it's worth doing that.
Yeah. Anyway, coincidentally, my recommendation for the week is another storytelling podcast that I just started listening to that is called Story Collider, and it's very much like The Moth or Speak Up. It's storytelling, but all of these stories involve science in some way. So you might think that sounds boring, but it actually is quite interesting because they're personal stories. They just all happen to involve science. So you might want to check that out.
Are they just stories, or like on the Speak Up, do they analyze them and say why this one was good or what could be better?
No, they don't analyze them at all. It's just people telling stories, and the stories involve science in some way. So the story from last week that actually was the first one I listened to that I really liked was about a guy who, at 15 years old, got his first computer in 1995, and he ended up learning about how to code. And he joined this new site called MySpace, and he realized he could write a little bit of code that basically made people add him as a friend. And it kind of spread like a virus, and within a day or two, he had 1 million friends. And the FBI showed up at his door with guns drawn. And anyway, it was a really great story. So I recommend this podcast. It's called Story Collider. So there you go.
Very good. I got to go listen to that. Thank you, Richard. Keep the questions coming in. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good day.